You are listening to Missed Apex Podcast. We love MotoGP.
Hello and welcome to Missed Apex MotoGP Podcast. This is a show put together by MotoGP fans pretending to be experts. We aim to have a race review show ready for a midweek commute. We may not be bike racers, but we love it. It's often said that in this MotoGP era of aero bits and pieces, you need to be at the front to stand a chance of actually winning a race. Luckily, for entertainment's sake, there was one guy to defy this logic at tricky Phillip Island. Marc Marquez had pretty much everyone in awe this weekend. But in what was arguably the best race of the season, Jorge Martin had a big share as well. He put a firmer grip on his impressive title challenge. Is the World Championship his to lose now? I'm your host today, Jules Seegers. Your regular MC Kyle had to go away to a whole different country called Wales, where he was somehow summoned to hang around with real scientists. We wish you a quick recovery from all that, Kyle, and hope to have you back next week. So today I'm joined in a virtual chat by some fellow MotoGP enthusiasts. First up is token northerner Danny Henney. What's up, Danny?
Hey, Jules. Glad to be here. What a race we witnessed at the weekend. So, yeah, looking forward to discussing some of the points. Old Doc Emmett Brown's off in Wales having some fun with the rest of the mad scientists. So we'll see if we can cope without him.
Let's see if we can. To do that, in the other corner is tire-obsessed trumpeter Matt Trumpets. How you doing, Matt?
I think you're going to have to teach me how you pronounce Jorge Martin's name because I am just jealous of how good that sounds compared to mine.
Yeah, it's the typical G us Dutchmen are capable of, the Jorge Martin. And I'm trying to get in the middle of that and the English style. So guys, we could talk about a lot of things regarding this weekend. We could talk about the cold, windy conditions at Phillip Island, about the wildlife, about the new track surface. Some of these things caused Friday's first practice to be cancelled altogether, and that left the riders with only one session to get into a top 10 for straight qualifying into Q2. We could talk about all that, but really the thing I think we need to talk about is that race, the Sunday race. Because it was a treat to be looking at what was happening there on the Phillip Island, among the clouds, among the sun. There was a promising grid and an even more delivering race to come to that. So the question I want to actually just put out to you guys is, did Phillip Island times Marc Marquez equal the best race of the season so far? And why is the answer to this question yes? Matt?
Well, that's an easy one for me. At my age, I can't remember anything more than 2 weeks ago. So yeah, absolutely. It's the best race we've seen in quite some time. And I think maybe part of it is the nature of the circuit. I love the circuit. I mean, I've virtually raced on it, so I know it. But man, when you see the bikes going, like, what was it? They were doing this slow motion shot all weekend long. It was like turn 3, maybe, just gliding the bikes around. It's incredible. You could just really grasp the skill involved in navigating the track at that speed. And the weather too. Like, what did we have? Like about 7 different seasons in 2 days there. It was just, nothing was the same. Huge challenge for the teams to get it all right. And the best part of it is, because of that, it was really a race that was made by the riders themselves. It wasn't just, oh, well, the Ducati is super fast, the 24, so no one can really do anything about it. Or, this is the best in the braking zone. Or, no, this came down to the riders and the skill. And I thoroughly loved it. They should just have all the races there. Be much easier.
Yeah, it was like Marquez and Phillip Island together. Like you said, these slow-mo shots, it was also going into turn 12, the last turn before on the straight, where he was almost playing with the rear tire and just making it skid and leaving all these marks on that new surface. And he had been on it like all weekend from the get-go. He was fast in that one practice on Friday, and he was fast on the Saturday morning. Actually, right up until qualifying when Jorge Martin did his thing, but we'll come to that later. So did he qualified second, which was pretty impressive. When we shortly look at that sprint race, which was, looking back at it, kind of an announcement of what was to come on Sunday, because he started second, but he fell back to eighth position, I think, Danny.
Ninth. When you look at it, I was watching the highlights earlier again just to check where he dropped to, and yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. We turn on, you see Marc Marquez in second position on the grid. We've said all year, what can he do if he's up at the front from the start and can go in the lead pack? And it's like he was just toying with us. He went there, this is a great track, I'm going to add some entertainment. I'll see what I can do. He got a good launch off the start and then ran wide in the first corner. Came out of it in ninth and then proceeded to put on a masterclass, not just in the sprint, but for the rest of the weekend, really.
You could see when you saw him almost toy with the riders in front of him, like crawling up to them out of turn 2 into turn 3, and then actually leading up to one of those only 2 really hard braking points in turn 4. It was almost like he was like looking, where can I put my grip down?
Yeah, it was like you said, the most evident was in the last 2 corners when you looked how much he could turn the bike compared to the other riders. It was insane. And I think it was it Bezecchi or it was someone else? He got a run on somebody. I can't remember if it was a sprinter in the main race. And he pretty much passed him by the time they'd got onto the main straight. It was insane, the amount of actual extra grip it looked like he had. And again, left-hand corner, we know he's awesome in left-hand corners, but it was like massively different. And what was really evident was he kind of blew past everybody. And then once he come up to the GP24, which I'm sure we'll discuss later on, it really showed the advantage that the 24 has compared to the 23 bike, because he would get that run, get the slingshot, and then pull into clean air and just hit a brick wall. And the 24 would just carry on. And it was, yeah, a great thing to watch. But oh my God, what skill through them last 2 corners, and made a lot of people look very amateurish through the weekend.
Well, personally, I was most impressed by how hard he had to work to put on a show for us. I mean, he was right there at the start, and both days he managed to find a clever way to drive backwards immediately. So he had something to do for most of the race and keep the commentators entertained.
Yeah, it was by his own doing that he had 2 of these, but especially on the Sunday, recovery races like we've seen like maybe 4 or 5 times already this season. And most of the times that had to do with him not getting into Q2 or just not really getting nailing down a quali lap. But this time, being too late on the brakes into turn 1 during the sprint, which made him fall back. But I think a lot of us have already heard why he fell back on the Sunday. The already, I guess, famous tear-off incident. Did you see what happened there, Matt?
Well, yeah. No. At the start, I just saw like the rear tire light up and he lurches sideways. I'm like, oh, great. There he goes again. And he's a perfect opportunity. He's going backwards. And then like suddenly they got around to turn 3 and he was in 6th place. And I was like, I didn't even begin to figure out how that happened. But what I will say is there's someone who put up a side view and essentially, and he himself said, I'm coming up to the grid and I'm focused on getting my ride height device. And basically he ran into a giant bug that just pasted itself right across his eyes. So he gets up there and they say, you're not supposed to do this, but like I couldn't see anything. So he pulls his tear off and he drops it, goes straight down. And then he reaches down. Like this is as the lights are going on. So this is like the concentration. He must have been so distracted. And he grabs the thing and tries to throw it further from his bike, but instead the wind picks it up and slides it right underneath his rear tire, so that when he hit the launch, it just spun up the rear tire and spat it out the back. And they did not get tired of showing that all weekend.
I have to say as well, you could try that another 100 times and probably not replicate what he did. It was such a freak incident that, as I say, you just didn't see it coming. I was with Trumpets. I watched the start and thought, oh, he's let the clutch out too fast or something, lit the tyre up. And then it weren't until they showed the replay to see exactly what happened with it, where you thought, oh my God, that tear-off's gone under the wheel. That's what's lit him up. And he's actually done well to only drop to 13th in the race. But I have to feel for him, because when I've been racing and you're going around and a bug splatters straight on your visor, it is horrible. It's like someone's threw a paintball at your visor and you can't see nothing. So I fully understand why he's wanting to get that clear for the start of the race, especially expecting to be battling in a pack, I should imagine. But yeah, freak accident, try it 100 times, you probably won't replicate it again.
Yeah, and we saw, even though he missed the first corner on Saturday, he had a lot, like he looked to be close to being able to make a move on Martin on the Saturday. So it was like one of those things, because like, I'm sort of a low key Martin fan at this point, just because I want to see chaos reign next season with the number one plate on the number one bike. And I'm like, oh man, but he's at real risk from Marquez just taking that spot away from him into the first turn, because they both had pretty good launches when they get on it. And then he just went sideways. And I was like, oh man, he'll never recover from, he's already recovered from that, hasn't he?
Yeah, it was almost like comedy capers when you saw I think it must have been Banyaya's front camera, that you saw Marquez dropping that tear off with, and actually apparently there's a rule, or an unwritten rule, that you don't tear one of those things off and drop it on the grid at the start, just because of what happened. But he had he said a giant mosquito, and then he dropped it, but just when he tried to take it from the grid or move it with his hand, the wind just blew it away just before he could get a hold of it, and then it blew under his rear tire. And because obviously Marquez was brilliant on Sunday, but I did think, like, because he said, yeah, I thought I'll throw away the tear off on this side because the wind would take it to the pit wall. And then I thought, but why didn't you throw it away with your left hand then? That is on the side of the pit wall, and that would probably have happened, And so maybe not too smart. Maybe he wouldn't have minded if it went underneath someone else's rear tire. I don't know. But it set him up for a delicious race, which was very entertaining for us to watch, because it threw him back to P13, and then by turn 5, I think he was in P4, P6, and then Binder went wide. Bezzecchi did his long lap penalty because of what happened between him and Vinales on Saturday. We'll come to that in a bit. And then that was it. He overtook Morbidelli, like Morbidelli wasn't on a GP24 on the straight, and then it was P3 for him.
Yeah, I have to pick that up. Morbidelli was the only 24 he come up on what didn't seem to have an advantage on him. And I'm not throwing conspiracies out there or anything, but both other 24s were like they had 10 mile an hour extra than him on the straight. Morbidelli actually got the run and got past him by the end of the straight. So interesting one, really. What is Morbidelli doing different to the other two? Because you're only going to be flat out down the straight. So whether it was engine mapping or something else, I'm not too sure. But he was the only 24 by what Marquez actually blew past. The other two, when he come up on it, there was a significant difference in performance. So like I say, maybe a conspiracy, maybe not, but it was certainly Morbidelli's bike didn't seem as as top end friendly as the other two.
Yeah, well,
he didn't. Oh, sorry, Matt.
No, that's okay. I think it's definitely one of those things. It may have also been when he came up on him, because he could have been managing his tire pressure already, and or trying not to overheat the rears and just not aware that he was vulnerable. But the one area the Ducati 24 had was the traction and the top end speed, and but the fact that he managed to just absolutely negate it with the corner speed he could carry and the way he could turn the bike was just, it was really stunning to watch in real time.
Yeah, you could see Marquez crawling up to pretty much everybody in that turn 12, that last turn, going on to the straight. And it could also be that Morbidelli just couldn't get his power down that early, or maybe in mapping indeed. But Marquez entering that straight was a different deal during the whole weekend anyway. So coming to that, was if we're trying to like explain or analyze the Marquez magic this weekend, was it a perfect mix of new surface, tricky conditions, not a lot of time to set up your bike, which seemed to hamper Bagnaia, anti-clockwise circuit, a lot of left-handers. Was it that? Was it the perfect mix for that, or did we get a glimpse, and maybe a terrifying glimpse, of what may happen next season when he gets his hand on that GP25, Henney?
I think a bit of both, really. I think he had a lot of things going in his favour. Obviously, the lack of running, we know he's very adaptable to the bike, especially in low grip situations. New surface, anti-clockwise is always going to favour Marquez. He's always ran well at Phillip Island as well. I mean, very rarely do you see a bad race at Phillip Island. Equally, I think the bike was a bit closer to the 24. But yeah, I also think he has shown a scary prospect of what is coming next week. I actually messaged Kyle, funnily enough, when I was watching it, and said, and I've said previously on the show, I'm convinced he is losing 3 to 5 tenths a lap on that bike, because just the top end advantage at the end of the straights, usually it's got mega traction out the corner where it leaves the 23 standing. And when we was watching the battles, just going back to Marquez coming out the last corners, he was knocking chunks out of Bagnaia on the exit of the last corner. Then it was really interesting to see when he got up to Martin, who took a similar line to Marquez, where it wasn't really a lot. He probably pulled a little bit back on him, but not as much as he was on Bagnaia. Bagnaia seemed to lose more on the initial phase and gain at the top end, whereas Martin was a bit more equal with him. But yeah, I think if Marquez had been, I'm absolutely convinced now. I know I'm a bit of a fan of Marquez, but if he was on a 24 bike, he would be taking his championship without a shadow of a doubt. He's quickly, for me, starting to be considered as potentially the rider of the season just for his consistency, because he's on lesser machinery. And when you look at his results, he's been pretty solid, to be fair. And when you compare him against the rest of the 23 bikes, he has annihilated everybody. So yeah, it was a bit of both. And next year it'll be interesting to see what him and Bagnaia can do against each other.
Well, I like the comparison against the other 23 bikes best, because that's the fairest comparison. They all have the same machinery, and he has just absolutely spanked anyone else with that equipment across the board. The 24 bike is different, and one of the biggest differences is in the travel in the rear ride height device. And this gives it some very big traction advantages into the braking zone and under acceleration. So when you're exiting the corner, but it also demands to be ridden a very specific way to really optimize that. Now, I have no doubt that Marquez will adapt to it. But if you look at him on the 23 bike compared to the 24, I'm not sure the bike will be as fun of a ride for him in some ways, because it demands a lower corner speed and less of the sliding and turning and using the rear. I think he uses the rear brake that he really gently massages to get the bike around. I'm not quite sure how he does it, because I'm not a rider like that. But I find I'm I'm willing to wait and see what he does with the 24 bike. And frankly, maybe we all need to wait because it's going to be a 25 bike and who knows what it's going to be capable of. But the conditions at Phillip Island, lack of information, massive feel, wet weather to dry weather, and especially with the soft tire on the rear, no one had run more than a sprint distance on it. So every team was guessing at the degradation, and it's literally, you're just like, oh yeah, okay, well, all right, would you like to start on first base? Well, how about second base? Why not third base? How about halfway to home? By the time we got to the Sunday race, he was in his element with the left-handers. But it's a joy. It's really a joy to see somebody fully in their wheelhouse and absolutely exercising every last bit of their talent.
Yeah, just to back that up, I think for me this weekend, we've seen it in other sports as well, but the rider really won that race this weekend. Wasn't the equipment, it wasn't he had a better bike than everybody else, he was on worse machinery than what was in the field. The rider truly made the difference this weekend, and very rarely do you see races where someone can go above and beyond the equipment they've got and go and take a race win. It was an absolute, I know we're gooning over it, but it was an absolute masterclass and a brilliant ride. And it could have been any rider. It didn't have to be Marquez. Anybody who put that kind of performance in was just an absolute masterclass and a joy to watch.
You know what, though? I am going to put in, I think he got extraordinarily lucky as well. Like all of the cards fell in his favor. The fact that Bezzecchi had to take that long lap penalty, which released Bagnaia. The fact that 2 or 3 people ahead of him went off in turn 1 when he dropped back to 13th. I mean, a lot of things did go exceptionally right for him as well. I don't want to overlook it, but I do want to shout out Martin. I think even though he was on the 24 bike, should have been an advantage. I'm not convinced that was the bike that was going to ever win the race with Marquez on the 23 bike. But I think he did a pretty spectacular job this weekend too. And that's part of what made this race so great.
Yeah, Martin was brilliant. Absolutely. Put in a masterclass performance, took the win in the sprint, delivered second place, beat Bagnaia in both races. Great performance from him. But just touching back on what you said, Matt, about Marquez getting lucky, I totally agree. I think his biggest break, what for me made him win the race, was when Bagnaia got past Martin and Martin got back past Bagnaia and Marquez managed to get through, because Marquez up to that point had kind of hit Bagnaia and hit a bit of a brick wall struggling to get past. I think if Marquez hadn't got through at that point, Martin would have probably won the race because the gap would have been a bit big to try and close down with the performance he had. But that was an extremely lucky point for me. And a key area of the race, what changed the result.
Yeah, I agree with you, because at that point it was Marquez pushing Martin having to drive defensively, and you could see it. Like for me, it was astonishing. The commentators were like, "It looks like his bike is on rails," and then lap 22, you could see out of every corner Martin's bike just getting squirrely on acceleration. And to me, I'm always thinking that's the rear tire, but all the riders said it was the front that was really going on them. But that's because the rear is demanding more of that front tire, and the front tire, literally being an older version, can't take it.
As you say as well, weren't it? It was a shame for Martin, really, because he'd been metronomic up to that point, consistent, banging in lap times. He hadn't made really one mistake in any of the races until that lap. And he run wide the littlest bit, and then bang, both of them was on it. You got the 3 there nose to tail, and then it just descended into chaos, didn't it? Changed the result of the race. It was amazing, because at that point you was watching going, oh, this might be a bit of a stalemate here. It's got potential to kick off, and boy, did someone throw the firecracker in there when he run wide and let the action start.
And yet we still didn't get the battle that everybody was looking for, which is just the gloves off heavyweights in the 15th round. Bagnaia versus Martin. It was Marquez being the Joker, the Heath Ledger Joker, the good one, shoving himself right through that tiny hole. And yeah, I had the thought, I was like, if this was a 22 lap race, he doesn't win it. But at 27 laps, you could see it coming. He was just every lap. It was just hard. It was more of a struggle out of every turn under acceleration to keep the front wheel pointed in the right direction. And man, I was like, oh, please don't throw it down the road. Keep the rubber side down to the end.
Yeah, brilliant as well, wasn't it? And when he got there, surprisingly, he managed it quite well. He was a bit Bagnaia-esque, just sat there, watched Martin, how he was going around the track, saw where he was quick, saw where he was using a bit of... And he actually come out after the race, didn't he? And said, I could see where Martin was using more of the tyre than I was. I just sat protecting my tyre, ready to attack. And then, as you know, it gets to lap 5, lap 4. He goes at him. Martin comes back. And then, obviously, boy, did he put a pass on him to get through in the end. It was awesome to watch. But, yeah, really smart drive, exciting. I think how much more can we say? It had everything, the race. Absolutely everything.
And this way, it almost starts to become a slight worry to see what Marquez can do now, and what will he be able to do on a GP25 in probably the best team around at the moment. And I'm curious to see is it going to be the Marquez tracks, or will he just like hammer it all season long like we have seen him do? But that's already around 6, 7, 8, maybe 10 years ago where he win like a multiple amount of races. And I do wonder, because obviously you hear people saying like, oh, he's gonna annihilate the competition next season, but we're a couple of years further down the road, and we all know his physical condition is vulnerable, but definitely will be an interesting thing to see, and how Martin and Bagnaia can position themselves in such a fight.
Well, I think the fun thing about this is they really do have different wheelhouses. Bagnaia is someone, if he's in front, can run to 100th the lap time that he wants to run, and he can manage the tires. And there are a lot of tracks where if you get the whole shot, if you're on pole position and you get out in front, there are some tracks where it's very difficult to pass. And there are some tracks that have a lot of right-hand turns in them. Neither one of these is really going to help Marquez out if we're talking about that battle. But we still have a championship battle here on track. And his move on Martin, which was, it was pretty, robust. Is that a good word to use? I'll use the word robust. It wasn't illegal, but it stood him up. And that was the end of it. And you could see Martin grappling with, he had that one look into turn 1 where you're like, maybe, but he wasn't able to make it stick. And then it was just it. It was over. He didn't have the tires left, and you could see him. And I think this is maybe a big difference to him last season to him this season. You could see him going, okay, not as many points as I wanted, but it's time to just bring this bike home in one piece, rather than take an increasingly large risk and maybe have it go the other way on me.
Yeah, from a battle perspective, I think you're right, Trumpets. Obviously, I only know from my personal things when I've been battling for championships. The last thing you want anywhere near you when you're getting close to the end of a championship and you're in the fight to a battle is some rapid person who not only is aggressive, will have a go at any moment. He's got nothing to lose. Martin was quite clever. He gave it a go, seen it come in, went for it, and thought, no, I don't want any of this, thanks. I'll let him have it. And because the second to last lap, what Marquez put in, I mean, he may have had the pace ultimately anyway, because it was mind blowing. But I thought Martin was quite clever on that one. He had a bit of a go at it and kind of went, no, not for me. I beat him Bagnaia. I beat him in both races. And he goes away now with a healthy championship lead of 20 points as well, which is nothing to be sniffed at.
No, and I love the fact that even after the race, Marquez said, oh yeah, and I knew he had more to lose than me. Like he made mention of it. But one thing that hasn't been mentioned is, as much as we're saying this is all about the rider, it's also all about the team. And they interviewed someone from Grissini after the race, Frankie, I'm going to say Cicchetti because that's a Venetian appetizer that I ate a lot of, but it's Cricelli or something like that. I couldn't quite catch it, but he was team principal, team manager. And they were interviewing about, he brought a tear off, but he said, oh yeah. And he says, special shout out to my electronics guy for getting the electronics absolutely right at turn 3. And you don't often hear someone from a team giving, and they were like, wait, there's electronics involved? And he's like, oh yeah. He says, if there were no electronics there, they'd just be right off the track. So I think you got to give a shout out to the people at Grissini for nailing that in a way that, neither of the 24s really did, but especially not the factory team. They struggled. They really had a hard time getting the bike set up. And you could see it in qualifying, like halfway through, especially in the rain, you could just see Bagnaia like so unhappy. And Martin, like he got off to a rough start, but wow, once he was on it, it was just like, it was scary to watch him in the wet do those lap times.
I don't know if I'd say the 24 bikes got it wrong. I mean, Martin's lap time weren't bad, was it, in quallifying? He must have got it right.
The factory team is what I mean. The factory team really, but yeah, you're right. I think was it Primac, right? Got the look at me. I pretend I know everything and I can't remember the names of the teams half the time. They did a pretty good job, but I think Grissini, for all they've been slated a bit from time to time for operational errors, they really got it together when it mattered here.
Well, you got the name by Frankie Cicchetti right, so that's at least one kudo for you, Matt. Now, before we get into more Jorge Martin, and indeed, one of the things I want to talk about later is Ducati Corse, the factory team, as good as we think it is? I want to play a little bit of the good old Whose Fault Is It first.
Whose fault is it?
Because we're already referred to the sprint race from the Saturday a tiny bit. It featured a super strong Jorge Martin who left from pole, a pole which he got with a 0.6 second difference to Marc Marquez in second place. So talking about dominance. And he portrayed that dominance further during the sprint race, took the win. Bagnaia struggled to P4 actually, with his teammate Bastianini nicking some points from him, ending on the third stage of the podium. But the thing about the sprint race was the huge crash between Marco Bezzecchi and Maverick Viñales. They were battling for P4. And Bagnaia was even behind them at that time, if I recall correctly. But it's not important for the incident. Viñales, who actually started from front row, like the previous Grand Prix, but again, also like the previous Grand Prix, totally fluked that and dropped back to like P10 or something. But he was clawing himself back into the order and then needed to get past Marco Bezzecchi for P4. He went for it on the straight, passed him, and then Bezzecchi ended up absolutely slamming into the back of Maverick Viñales Aprilia. Matt, what was your take on that incident first before we get to the actual punishment?
All right, so a lot of people aren't going to like this because the stewards very much handed him a long lap penalty for that bit of foolishness. And I think the thing that they noted was that he braked like 40 meters later than he had on the previous lap. But I'll tell you right now, I took one look at that and I immediately thought of a Formula One analogy, which was when Max Verstappen pulled in front of Daniel Ricciardo at the end of the straight in Baku. And Ricciardo just smashed into him. And when I saw that, I'm like, oh my goodness, Ricciardo, what have you done? But then when they broke it down afterwards and said, well, look, you lose a third of your front downforce when that other car pulls in front of you that close in the braking zone, and there's nothing you can do. If you look, you can see his front lock the moment Viñales pulled in front of him. And I looked it up because, like, on the replay, he was doing like about 149 miles an hour, like around 200 kilometers, a little less 200 kilometers an hour. But that wouldn't have been how fast he was going when he got to the braking zone. He would have been going closer to 345 kilometers an hour, which is about the top speed I saw down there, maybe a little bit less. That's about 0.4 of a second. Human reaction times at their best are maybe 1/10 of a second faster if you're not expecting something. And to have Vinales, who had a huge overspeed, sweep past you, that's taking away reference points that you're using. And at the same time, you're target fixing on him. Now you're trying to get a good run into that corner. But I don't think he expected Vinales to pull in front of him. And as soon as he did, that was just inevitable, in my opinion. So I don't like the penalty because I feel like the aerodynamics played a big role in what happened. And I don't think it was rider error.
So, answering the question, whose fault is it you blame? The aerodynamics?
Whose fault is it? I mean, honestly, yeah. Vinales is the one who swung in front of him, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure I can establish either rider clearly. Has it happened to them before in enough of a way that they should have been like, oh yeah, maybe I need to be careful about it. Because what I do remember is earlier somebody else in a similar pass, it was Bastianini, as a matter of fact, did have that overspeed and did not take that line. He didn't swing fully back out to the racing line. Bezzecchi was still kind of beside him a little bit, but he inked him out to the inside of turn one. So did Bastianini like just be dangerous to do that? Or is it just a natural line? I don't know. But I think the one thing I'm going to say with, 17 minutes here to explain my thinking is that I can't blame Bezzecchi for that, at least not penalty wise, because he was a passenger the moment Vinales was in front of him.
Yeah, and the thing is, we've seen these incidents a couple of times already. We saw it last year. I think it was the Qatar race where Bagnaia got overtook by Di Giannantonio. And Bagnaia got sucked into his slipstream and almost rammed him at the end of the straight there. And thing is, you can look at this from like kind of these are motor racing laws of physics. And say or these are the rules by the book, and say the rider who slams the guy in front is always the one who's at fault. But I thought, and we don't have all the information because Bezzecchi later he didn't comment on the Saturday, and after the Sunday race he said, you can see Vinales braking early and then releasing and braking again. So he thought that even though also the aerodynamics got into work, that Vinales had braked a lot earlier than he'd regularly do. So I think what I would want to say about this is that I wasn't impressed by Vinales afterwards. I don't know if you guys saw that, but they crashed hard, and I think it was estimated at 240 kilometers an hour when they actually hit the tarmac. So it wasn't at top speed anymore, but still, I mean, imagine that, right? And you could see them tumbling over into that gravel trap, and it left Bezzecchi laying there motionless. And Vinales got up. He was lucky to get up. And about the first thing he did was give Bezzecchi the finger. And I thought okay, I can imagine that it's adrenaline and you're very angry because from his point of view, he just overtook someone for P4 and get smashed into your back. But still, I mean, if you see that guy laying there motionless and what you do is point your finger or give him the finger, I didn't think that was classy. What about you, Danny?
Yeah, really disappointed in that. as someone who does racing in lower levels, personally, that lit me up, really put me off Vinales. If you have a crash and so I thought Bez was really hurt to start with because he lay on the ground, he weren't moving. And obviously I've seen Nakano have the massive incident at Mugello. We've seen plenty of riders, lose their life through crashes. So although I think Bezecchi's at fault for the crash because, as Trumpets said, he braked significantly later, he went into the back of him at the end of the day, there was enough space to miss him. Vinales, as I said, lit me up over that. I think, although I like aggressiveness, I like battling, a crash now and again, it's inevitable and everyone likes a bit of chaos now and again. But as you say, Jules, it was his reaction and it actually put me off him. I'm a big fan of Vinales. I'm a massive Top Gun fan. It's my favourite film ever. So the fact it's called Maverick gets me a fan. But that was just something I did not want to see. He's a fantastic rider when he's in the zone. He struggles a bit with a bit up and down performance, should I say. But yeah, he really let himself down there. When you consider that these are top level riders with kids looking up to him, etc., in the lower categories coming through and how to act as role models, he could have done better. So, like I say, apologies drone on about it, but it was just a disappointing thing to see from a top level sportsman. And especially considering the size of the crash, it wasn't a little one. I mean, I was going to start with Morbidelli Bingo. He got sucked into this phantom slipstream sucking you into the back of the bike. But I think the seriousness of it, as you say, Bez could have been really hurt from it as well. And although, as I say, I think Bez caused the crash and was at fault, I think it could have been handled better from Vinales afterwards. And unfortunately, Bez got the long lap penalty as well, what kind of took him out the battle in the Sunday race, because I think he could have got involved and had a bit of a say in the outcome.
Yeah, talking about disappointing, he actually got penalized for it with the long lap penalty, and he took that early on in the race, like you're obliged, I think, and it took him out between Jorge Martin and Bagnaia, and therefore also out of in between Marc Marquez and the guys in front. But it could have been very interesting because Bezecchi has been on fine form in recent races, and he was on the same GP23 that Marquez was. And obviously, still that's still a bit of a difference, but it would have been good to see what he could do. So let's conclude on that. Whose fault is it? And get on with the title fight. So we're left here after Phillip Island with Jorge Martin stretching his lead from 10 to 20 points on Pecco Bagnaia. And he must have been really, really encouraged by his strong performance during the sprint race because, as we already mentioned a bit on Sunday, he could have thought initially after the first time Marc Marquez attacked him, like, okay, I'm going to let this guy go and settle for my 20 points. But he actually thought, well, not sure about that. I'm gonna try and fight back and see if I can see off Marquez. He didn't settle second that easily, which was quite interesting to see as well. His strong performance in quali and the rest of the weekend, because you'd almost forget, but he actually crashed out of the first flying lap he did in this weekend. After Friday practice was cancelled, so the Friday afternoon session to qualify for Q2, the first lap he did, he immediately crashed out, and you could imagine that puts a dent into your confidence, and you kind of start down oh, how much risk am I going to take? But Jorge Martin was like the Jorge Martin, I guess we know and we come to know even better this season. Gets on the bike, opens up the throttle, and is fast right away. In that sense, he's maybe a bit like the Max Verstappen of MotoGP. He just doesn't seem to need any adjustment time whatsoever.
So the thing about him is that he does seem to have sort of that adaptability. And I will say that over a single lap, I did think that he had the fastest bike. It was just the full length. I don't think they were able to get the tires fully to the end in a way that would have let him win the race. But it was stunning to watch him, to watch those laps as the minutes are counting down, and just suddenly out of nowhere, he's like a second and a half faster. And you're just like, oh man, he's no one's really got it. The only other person I can recall, because it was 3 whole days ago now, was I think Marquez was putting in some fast-ish laps close to his own times, but everybody else just, you could see there was that patch of the track too, coming into the final turns, where every time they hit it, the bikes would just go absolutely squirrely, and you were just waiting for a disaster to happen.
Is there, because it's become clear that the GP24 of Jorge Martin has a different aero package than the GP24 Bagnaia is riding. I think it was in Indonesia when they brought an upgrade, and Bagnaia said, "I'm not going to take this. I'm going to stick with the initial package that they use in this season." And Jorge Martin went for it. And I was thinking, could that maybe also explain the difference between them in this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, so here I'm going to get into some serious grade A speculating. But based on what I know of these two riders, Bagnaia really loves to be super late and deep on the brakes. So what I imagine happening is this: you want a lot of stability, especially front end stability, if that's what you're going to do, because you're putting all of the weight immediately onto the front. And so you don't want the rear swinging around. So I would imagine that the package he chose gives him the most confidence in those braking zones. Whereas Martin, I think, is willing to give something up to be able to turn the bike quicker and be on throttle sooner. And I think the package he chose maybe is a little more unstable on corner entry, but that works in his favor because he gets the bike stopped and turned quicker. But I mean, stopped, I mean, obviously his minimum speed, but he gets the bike rotated quicker and back on throttle, which then lets the Ducati make maximum use of that long acceleration. When there's a couple of tracks in a row where you would see him have a top speed differential of 3, 4, 5 kilometers an hour. And the only way you get there, if you're on the same bike with the same engine, is by starting your straight sooner than the person you're racing. And that's the only way I can explain it. So yeah, again, at Phillip Island, sweeping turns, corner in, long corners, that's an advantage, Martin, because he gets more acceleration and more speed through those corners, just slower into them slightly.
Yeah, and Jorge is known for mastering corner exits better than Bagnaia.
I'm glad I just didn't sound really stupid to everybody then.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Never, Matt. So this and I thought it was a nice example of how Ducati is letting these guys race with equal machinery and equal options. I really think that's important to state, because we discussed earlier and also in our chat group, like it's got to be worth a lot for Ducati to not let Jorge Martin run off with a number 1 play to Aprilia, but it seems like they are really giving them all equal opportunities, given the exact same equipment. They tested apparently 25 chassis on Bagnaia at the Misano test, and he liked it, but they said, we're not going to run it this season because we can't equip all of the Ducati riders with it. So I think that's really classy. And also, if you see the way the Marquez successes are celebrated by the Ducati Corse guys. I think it's a real example of sportsmanship, and that you can be rivals and you can be competitors without, going all Christian Horner about it. Anyway, so last thing, what I wanted to discuss about Jorge Martin is he extended his lead, and we're only with 3 races left, really. And as far as I'm concerned, we're getting to a point where you can say, like, okay, this title fight isn't going on and on and on. This title fight is getting up until the end, really. And is by now, can we already say, okay, this title is Jorge's to lose right now?
Nope, absolutely not. We've seen too many swings and roundabouts. This thing is not going to be over until the last lap of the last race, I think. You've got Marquez, you got Bastianini, you've got other riders who are going to Vinales. You just never know when someone's going to make a mistake and just absolutely take someone out. And I think it's crucial and interesting to note that what he really would have wanted out of this race, Martin, if you just asked him, double the lead up to 20 points. Yeah, absolutely smash it compared to Bagnaia. Yeah, but he's still one DNF away from being on the wrong side of that line. And he could have been, if he'd won the Sunday race, he could have had one free and clear race. If that was the case, maybe it's different. But I think both riders are like, no, gotta win to get to the championship. And I love that, because eventually it's going to come out on track and it's just going to be glorious racing.
He's getting close for me. He is getting close. The next round, in my opinion, is probably the most critical round of the season, pending the last round, obviously, if it goes in tight. Because he's in a position now, a bit like Trumpets was saying, he got close, got beat Sunday, so it's dropped him back down. That magical number of 25 points having in your back pocket when you are racing, the confidence you get from that, I cannot, really get across. It's amazing how much extra confidence you'll get from going, I know I can afford a mistake. You know what I mean? I can have a bit of a bad race. It's not the end of the world. Bagnaia has got to be perfect. And he's coming up to some tracks where he's all right, but he's not amazing at Malaysia. So, it will see where it goes. But the next round is the critical one. If Martin can beat Bagnaia at the next round and go into the next race with, I'd say, 30 points, he is in a massive, confident position, pretty much with Bagnaia relying on him having a spill or something, because the problem Bagnaia's got now is Marquez is getting involved. And he may not be winning every races, but he can certainly, I'd say he's more than likely going to take points off Bagnaia than he is off Martin. Because Martin has got in the supreme position. And Martin, as we've seen, maybe not as fast as Bagnaia at some tracks. So Bagnaia has a higher peak, but Martin is super consistent. So if he can't win, he'll bag the second. So, yeah, critical race coming up.
And don't overlook Bastianini. One thing that's, I don't know what package Bastianini is running, but both of the Ducati Corsa riders were at pains to not say their big problem on the Sunday was the front tires. But that was definitely their big problem on the Sundays. I'm not going to say it's Michelin's fault, but it was very clear they weren't happy with the way the tires were reacting from the morning warm-up to the race tires they put on for the race. And that's just an unpredictable factor, I think, for everybody. But I think it's a particular weakness of the Ducati, again, because of how they can get so much use out of that rear tire. If you get a little bit of an off tire, or, if you don't pick your best tire for the race, then you really are at a disadvantage. And that does seem to be something Martin's team has done a better job with. Even though he said it was his front that eventually went on him, if you look at the time that he put into Bagnaia, it was obvious they'd done a way better job. And I don't know, maybe it is that one package choice he made to stay comfortable and confident. Maybe that is going to be a big turning point for the rest of the championship. But the universe has seen fit to not let it get too far away from anybody. So I wouldn't be betting money right now if I was you.
Yeah, before we get to a bit of Pecco Bagnaia, I want to tell you guys to, if you'd be kind enough to do so, follow us on Twitter or X, Elon's toy, at Missed Apex Moto. Or if you want to get in touch with us, have a question or any ideas, or as Kyle always says, want to tell us how beautiful we are, you can also email us at missedapexmoto@gmail.com. So his name has been dropped and he is under pressure for real now. Pecco Bagnaia. And leaving Phillip Island, he was like, okay, I kind of calculated this and I thought this wasn't going to be my best track. And now we're going to Thailand and Malaysia, and they are good tracks for me. And I do have the feeling there. And it all started to sound to me a bit like, can you really afford to have bogey tracks in this championship, Danny?
No. He's, as I said earlier, he's getting to the position now where he has got to be, at the next round, Pecco Bagnaia has got to win the sprint and the main race and get some points back on Martin. Or else, as I say, it's starting to get to be game over time for him soon. The challenge he has is, he says he's good at Thailand and Malaysia. Martin is also good at Thailand and Malaysia. And my money, although Trumpets said about betting and it's too close, but my money, if I was going singular races, I would put my money on Martin at Thailand to take it. Because I don't know why, he just seems to do better, in my opinion, at those kind of tracks. Bagnaia might be stronger at Malaysia than Martin, but I have a funny feeling I think Bastianini's going to win Malaysia. I think he'll just keep the tyre alive. They're long, sweeping corners. You're on the side of the tyre for a long time. I think Bastianini will take Malaysia. I think Martin will take Thailand. And I think Pecco will be second or third in both races. And he's going to be in for a challenging time. It could all be over at the end of Malaysia. But yeah, to answer your original question, you cannot not have bogey tracks. You maybe can have one race over the season, you can have a bad race, but if you want to win a championship, you've got to be consistent everywhere. And Martin is showing that at the minute, and Bagnaia is having probably stronger performances, but just not as often.
Yeah, it's just the nature of the point structure right now. All Martin has to do is beat Bagnaia or finish right behind him, unless Bagnaia runs the table. And just no one has had that dominant a streak where they win the sprint, they win Grand Prix, they win the sprint. Has anyone won both 3 races in a row? I can't think of it this season. And that's just, a shout out to the sport. Good job for making it really great racing. But he's got a much, much more difficult task. And I think he's going to need help from Jorge to pull it off. So just from a guessing point of view, you're right. He can't afford to be behind him for the rest of the season. And I don't see that happening. It's going to take, he's going to have to finish multiple places ahead if he's not winning races. And it just, Martin hasn't shown that weakness all season long. So, but it's going to be great to watch, won't it?
Yeah, and I think you got to be careful to, when you start pinpointing your own weak spots, and you got to be careful not to start living up to them like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like I saw the first the practice that did go ahead on Friday, and I noticed Bagnaia went out, and he immediately went back in again. Got off his bike, goes into his box, and the first thing he does is start talking to the Michelin guys. And already immediately he had something that didn't feel right or needed to be better. And if you go into a weekend like that, I don't know, it's I think you're making yourself a bit vulnerable. And if you start labeling these races like, yeah, but these are going to be my strong ones, these I have better feeling. What happens if he gets up to Buriram next weekend on the Friday and he doesn't have that feeling, or Martin is faster than him, which going from last year's results is very, very probable because Martin was very strong there and he had the pole and he won the race there. So what happens then? Do you start doubting yourself again or your setups? And it's becoming a bit of a thing. And Matt referred to this earlier on already, that tracks like Indonesia, but also this weekend, where Ducati factory team, the Ducati Corse, they can't really seem to get the bike right. And I mean, these are the guys who are supposed to be the best team with like geniuses like Dalinia and the very recognizable Tardozzi, and it makes you wonder, like, I mean, Pramac is the world championship team from last year, and if you see like how they get Jorge Martin on his bike and ready and ready to go from the get-go, it makes you wonder, like, is Ducati still that force that we, apart from all the mechanical stuff, the bike quality, but are they also the best team? Matt?
That's a really good question. I'm not sure I'm expert enough in MotoGP operational things, but you'd be correct. They had a hard time getting him out, I think, in the sprints. Like something got stuck. Like he missed a lap at the end of the practice, I believe, because they had a stuck tire warmer. I mean, just the craziest stuff. And sometimes it is just the universe saying, like, you've run out of luck. But if you ask me for a team-to-team comparison right now, I would say, yeah, Pramac definitely seems to be a little slicker overall.
Yeah, I agree with you, Matt. I think Pramac have when you look at team performance, have made the least amount of errors when across the season. And you hit the nail on the head. Whenever you see Martin get on the bike, very rarely does he go out on track and he doesn't look very competitive. Bagnaia can jump on and he can be, he can look all at sorts and take a long time to try and sort the bike out. And often he doesn't seem to sort the bike out in a race. It's just his consistency which will carry him to a result. Just picking back up on what you said, Jules, about Bagnaia kind of coming out and talking about his own weaknesses. That's the one thing I will say, what, for me, I would like to see Bagnaia drop. He's kind of too nice for his own good. He's a hell of a rider, but he just does not have that arrogance that most world champions have. You look at a lot of world champions. You'd never hear Marquez, for example, or Rossi come out and say, these are my weak tracks coming up. I'm probably not going to do very good, etc. They could probably think they're not ever going to get a result at all. But you talk to them, they'll say, "Yep, we'll be at the front. We'll give it my best. We'll go out there. We'll be fighting in the mix, etc., etc." As a champion of sport, obviously, you never want to let any competitor know you've got any kind of weakness. Again, I can only relate to my own bits. If I'm having a horrendous day and you say to me, "How are you going to get on?" I'll be at the front. Even if I think I've not got a chance in hell, because sport is exactly the same across the categories. It's equally a mental game as it is physical and your skill set. People really misunderstand the aspect that a mental, psychological warfare can have in sport. And as I've said before, you look at a lot of the top multiple world champions and they're ruthless. They'll play stupid little games, talking about the F1 comparisons, you got Senna and Prost and Mansell and Lauda and Piquet and all that. Rossi, Marquez, Lorenzo, they've all been at it. It's just, you've got to have that arrogance and mean streak in you. And Pecco is a fantastic rider, but he needs to, for me, develop that. I think I'd like to see him take that next step on it, but he's just such a nice guy. He doesn't seem to have it in his makeup, but certainly do not come out talking about weaknesses, especially when you're behind. If you're in front, fair enough, but yeah, not when you're behind.
I would disagree with you to the extent that I would only say, I'm not sure how I'm going to do if I felt like I was absolutely going to smash it. Like if I just wanted to ambush my opponent and make them think they had it in the bag, but I knew I had something special, I might be like, oh, I'm not sure how I'm going to do here. And then I would just go crush it. But it does remind me of my cycling days. A guy I raced with won a major stage race. And he told me that his thing on a massive climb, when you're suffering, his favorite thing to do, whenever the more it hurt, he said, the more I smiled. And he says people would turn around and just see me grinning and they would just give up. They would just give up. And that is what Danny's talking about. And I completely agree. Bagnaia, he's got his thing and he knows he's good at it, but we'll see. We'll see. The test is coming up now.
We will see, and we will see in less than a week's time already. Thankfully, it keeps going on, and we don't have to wait very long. We're going into the Thailand Grand Prix this coming weekend with Jorge Martin leading with 424 points, followed at a 20-point deficit by Pecco Bagnaia. And then Marc Marquez and Bastianini can see whoever ends up third. We're going to wrap it up, but not before we do our quick small award show. The Rider of the Weekend. Trumpets. You always strike me as a guy who has his favorite lined up already.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, you made a mistake going to me first because I'm going to scoop the most obvious choice here, and that's going to be Marquez with a shout out to the Electrics guy for the third corner on Grassini. Yeah, just I don't know how you could not pick him. So I picked him.
Danny, how about you?
In his Trumpets, Nick Martin as well, which I think we all probably had. I'm going to go for Martin because I think he put the next best performance in over the weekend. Won the sprint, second in the feature race, and obviously beat Bagnaia. So Jorge Martin and my Rider of the Weekend.
Fair enough and expected. I'm going to go for our Italian friend Di Gianantonio, just because I already thought you guys would go for the number 1 and 2. But I want to quick shout out to DJ because he not only finished P4 on Sunday, coming from a 12th starting position, but he's also going to ride his last Grand Prix of the season coming weekend. He's going for that shoulder surgery to line him up well for the 2025 season when he will be on a GP 25. So, and I think he's been in also like Bezzecchi, also quite a good form, but also obviously hampered by his shoulder. So I think it's a good thing that he gets that looked at properly, so he can maybe get into the mix next season. So for the moment of the weekend, Danny, what about you?
Ooh, there's a few to choose from, isn't there? There's a few obvious ones I think people will go for. For me, I'm going to stick with what I said earlier about the feature race. I think that moment when Jorge Martin got back past Bagnaia, ran him wide, and Marquez managed to get through, as I said earlier, was the moment of the race for me, because I think that was the difference between Marquez winning and Marquez losing. So Jorge Martin's pass on Bagnaia is my moment of the race.
Matt?
And I know you think I'm going to go for that tear off and the start on Sunday, because that is a very good choice. But I'm actually not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to pick Pedro Acosta's crash that took him out of the weekend, because without that, the Sunday race might have been wildly, wildly different. And it's one of those things that you can't say it had an effect because he was gone from it. But looking at how he rides the bike, I think he would have been part of the conversation on Sunday and could have entirely changed what we saw.
Yeah, and we're still to see if he's gonna be racing next weekend. I think he's gonna be declared fit or unfit at the track. So let's hope he's back. Okay, quick moment of the weekend for me then. The image that I keep having in mind is Marc Marquez in that turn 12, that final turn before on the straight, just leaving those skid marks, and not once and not in one session, but through all the weekend. It was almost like he was just toying with grips and the laws of physics, and it was a joy to watch. And let's hope we get more of those eye candy thingies in the coming races. So that leaves us with the very last bit. Trumpets, can our listeners reach out to you on any of the social platforms?
Always say hi. Let me know what you think about the show. Would love to hear from you at MattPT55 on any of the socials except for Facebook, where I am Matt Trumpets.
Very well. How about you, Danny?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter or X, whichever one it's called. I always forget. The Danny Henney F1.
And that goes for me too. You can find me on X, and my handle is Jules Seegers, and that's SEE. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. We're happy to welcome you back at our next review after the coming weekend's Thai Grand Prix. If you want to leave us some feedback, again, you can reach us at missedapexmoto@gmail.com. And for now, thanks for listening as always, and hopefully until our next review.